The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. 12 species sat in their floating chairs. Looking down at the single human standing in the center of the room, Ambassador Kang Tae-ho kept his back straight and his face calm, even though his heart was beating fast. He already knew what they were going to say. He had known for weeks. The Vothran High Speaker, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms, stood up from his chair. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. The Council has reached its decision. Humanity is found guilty of dangerous expansion and threatening galactic peace. The punishment is immediate banishment to the Outer Rim. All human colonies will be transferred to Council control. All human ships will be taken. This decision is final. Tae-ho did not blink. He had spent 3 years trying to prevent this moment. He had begged, argued, and offered everything humanity had. But it was never about what humans did wrong. It was about what they might become. The elder races had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They did not want competition. "We have done nothing wrong," Tae-ho said. His voice was steady. "You are sending 6 billion people to die." The Vothran looked at him with cold eyes. "The Council has spoken. You have 72 hours to gather your people. Any human found outside the Outer Rim after that time will be destroyed." The other species said nothing. Some of them looked away. A few of them had voted against the banishment, but not enough. Fear had won. Fear of what humanity could become if given more time. 3 days later, the exodus began. General Lee Hanna stood on the bridge of the refugee carrier Dawn of Hope. Through the window, she could see hundreds of ships filling the darkness of space, old cargo vessels, passenger transports, mining ships, anything that could carry people and supplies. Behind them, Council warships followed like wolves herding sheep. "How many?" she asked her second in command, Park Sung-woo. 4,200 ships, he replied. 6 billion people. We lost contact with the Mars colony. The Council ships arrived before the evacuation was complete. Hana closed her eyes for a moment. Mars, 12 million people, gone. "Record everything," she said. "Every ship we lose. Every person who dies. Every insult they give us. One day, someone will want to know what happened here." Sung-woo nodded and activated his recording device. He was a historian before the banishment. Now he had a different kind of history to write. The journey to the Outer Rim took 4 months. The Outer Rim was the edge of known space, a region filled with dead stars, radiation storms, and planets that no species wanted. The Council had sent other troublesome races there before. None of them had survived more than a few generations. During the journey, thousands died. The ships were overcrowded. Food ran low. Medicine ran out. Children got sick and there was nothing anyone could do. Hana walked through the refugee sections every day, talking to families, holding the hands of dying old men, promising mothers that their children would have a future. She did not know if she was lying. Tae-ho joined her fleet halfway through the journey. His diplomatic ship had been stripped of weapons, but they let him keep it. A final insult, perhaps. Let the ambassador watch his people suffer. "I failed them," he told Hana one night when they were alone in her office. "I was supposed to protect humanity. I was supposed to make them see we were not a threat." Hana poured him a drink, real alcohol, from the last bottle she had saved from Earth. "You did everything you could. They were never going to listen. They made their decision before you even opened your mouth. Then why did they bother with a trial? Because they wanted to feel good about themselves. They wanted to say they gave us a chance." Hana finished her drink. "That is how powerful people work. They hurt you, then they blame you for making them do it." The fleet reached the Outer Rim on the 219th day after the banishment. Scouts had found a planet that might support life. It had a breathable atmosphere, liquid water, and land. It also had active volcanoes, toxic storms, and radiation levels that would kill an unprotected human in hours. They called it Shin Terra, New Earth. The landing was chaos. Ships crashed because their pilots were exhausted. Equipment broke because it was old and poorly maintained. The first settlement was just a collection of tents in a valley between 2 smoking mountains. The sky was orange with ash. The ground shook every few hours. On the first night, Hana gathered the leaders of the different ships together. There were military officers, scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, and ordinary workers. They were all tired. They were all scared. They were all angry. "The Council believes we will die here," Hana said. "They think this planet will kill us in a few years, and the problem of humanity will solve itself. They are wrong." She looked at each face in the crowd. Some of them were crying. Some of them were stone-faced. All of them were listening. "We are going to survive. We are going to build. We are going to make this dead rock into a home. And one day, our children or our grandchildren will look up at the stars and remember what was done to us, not for revenge, for justice, for proof that they could not break us." Teho stepped forward. "I spent my whole life believing that if we were good enough, peaceful enough, useful enough, the galaxy would accept us. I was wrong. They will never accept us. They will only respect strength. So we will become strong, not to conquer, not to destroy, but so that no one can ever do this to us again." The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping, then another. Soon the whole valley was filled with the sound of applause and cheering. It was not hope exactly. It was something harder than hope. It was determination. That night, the first construction crews began digging into the volcanic rock. They worked through the toxic storms and the earthquakes. They worked until their hands bled. They worked because stopping meant dying. And dying meant the Council was right. In the first year, they lost 200,000 people to disease, accidents, and radiation. They buried them in the valley and marked each grave with a stone. Hana visited the graves every week until the day she died, 14 years later, still fighting for her people. But for every person they lost, 10 more were born. For every setback, they found a new solution. For every moment of despair, someone stood up and reminded them why they had to keep going. The Council thought they were sending humanity to its grave. Instead, they had given them something far more dangerous than weapons or ships. They had given them a reason to rise. 5 years had passed since the landing on Shintera. The orange sky still burned with ash. The ground still shook with volcanic anger. The radiation still killed anyone foolish enough to walk outside without protection. But humanity was still alive. Dr. Yoon Ara wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked at the green shoots pushing through the dark soil. Her hands were covered in dirt. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. But she was smiling. "It is working," she whispered to herself. "It is actually working." For 3 years, she had worked on creating plants that could survive the radiation and toxic soil of Shintera. She had failed hundreds of times. She had watched entire crops die overnight. She had been told by other scientists that it was impossible, that they should focus on importing food from the ships that still orbited above. But the ships were running out of supplies. And Ara knew that if humanity could not grow its own food, it would starve within a decade, so she kept trying. She modified the genes of wheat, rice, and vegetables. She tested them in the poisoned ground. She watched them die and started again. And finally, after 1,000 failures, she had created something that could live. She called them survival crops. Within 2 years, every underground city on Shintera was growing them. Ara never asked for credit or fame. She just moved on to the next problem. The next impossible task. The underground cities were the work of engineer Cho Dae-jin. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke more than a few words at a time. But when he drew plans on paper, people listened. The surface of Shintera was too dangerous for permanent settlements. The radiation, the storms, and the volcanic eruptions made it a death trap. So Dae-jin looked underground. He found that the volcanic rock was strong enough to carve into. He discovered that the planet's hot core could provide unlimited heat and energy. He designed cities that went down instead of up. The first underground city, called Haven, took 2 years to build. It had living spaces for 50,000 people, farms using Ara's crops, water recycling systems, and air filters that removed the poison from the atmosphere. It was not beautiful. The walls were rough stone. The lights were dim. The air smelled like metal, but it was home. By the 5th year, there were 5 underground cities on Shintera. 300,000 people lived in them. It was a small number compared to the billions who had been banished, but it was enough. It was a beginning. The surface was still dangerous, but some people had to go up there. They needed to mine metal, repair equipment, and watch for threats from the sky. These surface workers were the bravest and craziest people in the colony. Many of them did not live long. Baek Jin-soo was one of them. He was 22 years old when he first put on a radiation suit and walked onto the burning plains of Shin-Terra. He was the son of farmers who had died on the journey from Earth. He had nothing left to lose. His first job was simple: guard the mining crews from the creatures that lived on the surface. Shin-Terra was not completely dead. Strange animals had evolved in the radiation, things with too many legs and mouths full of poison. They attacked anything that moved. Jin-soo learned to fight them. He learned their patterns, their weaknesses, their fears. Within a year, he was leading his own squad of surface fighters. Within 3 years, he was commanding all the defense forces on Shin-Terra. He was not cruel or aggressive. He simply did what needed to be done, without complaint, without hesitation. When a creature killed one of his soldiers, he mourned. Then he went back out and killed 10 more creatures. That was how survival worked. His sister, Baek Nari, took a different path. She had been a singer on Earth, performing in small clubs for small crowds. On Shin-Terra, there were no clubs, but there were thousands of frightened, exhausted people who needed something to hold on to. Nari started a radio broadcast. Every evening, her voice would echo through the underground cities, telling stories about the day's progress, sharing news from different settlements, and reminding everyone that they were part of something bigger than themselves. Today, the engineers in City 3 finished their new water system, she would say. Tomorrow, the farmers in Haven will harvest their first wheat crop. We are building something here. We are becoming something. Do not give up. We are all in this together. Her voice became the sound of hope. Children fell asleep listening to her. Workers hummed her songs while they dug through rock. Soldiers whispered her words before going into battle. She never thought of herself as important. She was just doing what she could. But years later, when historians wrote about the survival of humanity, they always mentioned Baek Nari. They said her voice saved more lives than any weapon. By the 10th year, Shin-Terra had changed. The 17 underground cities held 3 million people. Factories produced tools, vehicles, and equipment. Schools taught children who had never seen Earth. Hospitals healed wounds and cured diseases that would have killed everyone a decade ago. Ambassador Kang Tae-ho, now old and gray, stood at the observation window of Haven and looked at what humanity had built. Beside him stood General Lee Hana, though she preferred to be called just Hana now. The war was not over, but her part in it was almost done. They said we would die, Tae-ho said softly. They were wrong. Hana coughed. The radiation had damaged her lungs years ago. She did not have much time left. But this is just the beginning. Shin-Terra is not enough. We need more worlds, more resources, more space to grow. The scouts found 3 more planets in the outer rim that might work. Dead worlds, but not as bad as this one. Hana nodded. Send the colonists. Build more cities. Spread out. The more we grow, the harder we are to kill. She died 3 months later, in her sleep, surrounded by the people she had saved. They buried her in the Valley of Stones, next to the 200,000 who had died in the first year. Her gravestone was simple. Lee Hana. She brought us home. Jin-soo stood at her funeral and made a promise. He would protect what she had built. He would make sure her sacrifice meant something. The stars above Shin-Terra were hidden by clouds of ash. But Jin-soo knew they were there. And he knew that one day, humanity would reach them again, not as refugees, not as victims, as something the galaxy had never seen before. 20 years had passed since the banishment. The outer rim was no longer a graveyard. It was becoming something else entirely. Admiral Baek Jin-soo stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, the first warship built entirely by human hands since the exile. It was not a beautiful ship. It had no smooth curves or elegant designs. It was all sharp angles and heavy armor, built for one purpose: to fight and to win. Engine test complete, reported his tactical officer, a young woman named Yu Mirei. All systems operating at full capacity, Jinsu nodded. He was 42 years old now, with gray streaks in his black hair and lines on his face that told the story of a hard life. But his eyes were still sharp. His mind was still fast. "Take us out of orbit," he ordered. "Let us see what she can do." The Vanguard shot forward like an arrow. The acceleration pushed Jinsu back into his chair. Around him, the crew cheered. This was the moment they had worked toward for 10 years. This was proof that humanity was no longer helpless. The ship was faster than anything the Galactic Council had. Its weapons were more powerful. Its shields were stronger. The engineers had studied every piece of Council technology they could find and then made something better. Necessity was a good teacher. Desperation was an even better one. Back on Shinterra, Chancellor Kang Eunbi watched the test flight on a screen in her office. She was 40 years old, the daughter of Ambassador Taeho, who had died peacefully 5 years ago. She had inherited his intelligence and his patience, but not his faith in diplomacy. "The Vanguard is everything we hoped for," said her advisor, a former engineer named Ko Jun-ho. "With ships like this, we could take back our old colonies. We could show the Council what happens when you push humans too far." Yunbi shook her head slowly. "No. That is exactly what they expect us to do. They want us to attack. They want an excuse to wipe us out completely. Then what do? Just sit here and wait? We grow. We build. We make alliances." She turned away from the screen and looked at the map on her wall. It showed the outer rim, now dotted with human colonies on 14 different worlds. "We are not the only species the Council has thrown away." This was her great idea, the vision that would change everything. The Council had banished many species over the centuries. Some had died out. Others had survived, barely, on the edges of known space. What if humanity found them? What if they offered help instead of conquest? The first contact came 6 months later. A human exploration ship discovered a small fleet of vessels hiding in an asteroid field. They were Velic ships, belonging to an insect-like species that the Council had exiled 300 years ago for refusing to give up their homeworld. The Velic were dying. Their ships were falling apart. Their population had dropped from billions to less than 1 million. They expected the human ships to attack or ignore them. Instead, the humans offered food, medicine, and shelter. "Why?" asked the Velic leader, a creature with compound eyes and clicking mandibles. "Why would you help us? We have nothing to give you." The human captain, a woman named Shin Hee-jin, smiled. "Because someone should have helped us when we needed it. No one did. We will not make that mistake." The Velic joined the Terran Compact 1 year later. They brought skills in building things from almost nothing, knowledge of parts of space that humans had never explored, and a fierce loyalty to the species that had saved them from extinction. The Morul came next. They were an aquatic species, fish-like creatures who lived in vast water tanks on their ships. The Council had exiled them for developing weapons that were deemed too dangerous. They had wandered the outer rim for a century, slowly losing hope. Humanity gave them a moon with liquid oceans. The Morul wept when they saw it. They had not touched open water in generations. Then came the Torvin, the Ashkari, the Pelin, and a dozen other species. Some were powerful. Some were weak. Some had been enemies of each other for centuries. But in the Terran Compact, they found something new, a place where they belonged. Yunbi established the rules of the Compact carefully. No species would rule over another. All would contribute what they could. All would receive what they needed. Decisions would be made together, through discussion and voting. It was not perfect. There were arguments, disagreements, and sometimes fights. But it held together. "The Council threw us away because we were different," Unbi said at the first gathering of the Compact. Representatives from 20 species sat before her, in a great hall, carved from the rock of Shinterra. "We will never do the same to others. This is our promise. This is our law." The Compact grew stronger every year. Trade routes connected dozens of worlds. Shipyards produced hundreds of vessels. Scientists from different species worked together. combining their knowledge to solve problems that none could solve alone. Admiral Jin Su built a fleet of 200 Vanguard-class ships. He trained crews from every species in the compact. He developed tactics that used the unique strengths of each race. The Velic were excellent scouts. The Morul could fight in environments that would kill anyone else. The humans tied them all together. Jin Su's sister, Nari, was still broadcasting. Her voice now reached across the entire Outer Rim. She told stories of cooperation, of friendship, of hope. She reminded everyone why they were fighting. "We are not building an army," she said one night. "We are building a family. Families fight sometimes. Families disagree. But families protect each other. That is what the compact is. That is what we are." In the core of the galaxy, the Galactic Council heard rumors about what was happening in the Outer Rim. They dismissed them at first. How could a bunch of exiled species become a threat? How could humans, of all creatures, lead a coalition of aliens? But the rumors kept coming. Traders spoke of new ships that moved faster than anything they had seen. Scouts reported colonies on worlds that should have been uninhabitable. Spies sent messages about a growing power in the darkness. The Council began to worry. They sent messages to the Terran Compact, demanding information, making threats. The messages were ignored. Finally, they decided to act. They would send a fleet to the Outer Rim and remind these exiles who ruled the galaxy. It was the biggest mistake they would ever make. 40 years after the exile, a Council patrol fleet entered the Outer Rim. 12 warships, the best the Vothran Empire had to offer. They came to investigate the rumors, to see what humanity had built, and to crush it if necessary. They never returned. The Council sent messages demanding answers. Ambassador Go Woojin, a young man with cold eyes and a calm voice, sent back a simple reply: "Turn back. This space belongs to the Terran Compact. Any ship that enters without permission will be treated as an enemy." The Council was shocked. No one had spoken to them like this in 1,000 years. No one had dared. They gathered in their great hall, the same hall where they had banished humanity 4 decades ago. The same species sat in the same floating chairs. The same arrogance filled the air. But now there was also fear. "We must destroy them," the Vothran High Speaker declared. "We must remind the galaxy what happens to those who challenge the Council." Some voices spoke for caution. The Terran Compact was larger than they had expected. The technology was unfamiliar. Perhaps negotiation was wiser than war, but the majority wanted blood. They had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They would not be frightened by a group of exiles. The Council assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. 500 warships from 8 species. 50 million soldiers. Weapons that could crack planets in half. They called it the Restoration Fleet, because they planned to restore order to the Outer Rim. Admiral Baek Jinsu received the news on the bridge of his flagship, the TCS Remembrance. He was 62 years old now, his hair completely white, his face lined with scars from battles fought and won. Around him stood officers from a dozen species, all waiting for his orders. "How long until they reach Shinterra?" he asked. 47 days at their current speed," replied Captain Yu Mirei. She had served with Jinsu for 20 years. She knew his moods, his strategies, his fears. "They are not trying to hide. They want us to see them coming." Jinsu nodded slowly. "They want us to be afraid. They want us to run or surrender." He stood up from his chair and walked to the window. Outside, the stars of the Outer Rim glittered in the darkness, stars that had once been a prison, but were now a home. "We will not run," he said quietly. "We will not surrender. We have spent 40 years preparing for this moment. Every ship we built, every soldier we trained, every alliance we made, was for this." He turned back to his crew. "Send word to all compact forces. The Council is coming. Let them come. We will show them what exiles can do." The next 47 days were filled with preparation. Ships gathered from across the Outer Rim. Velic scouts tracked the enemy fleet's movements. Moral engineers reinforced the defenses around Shinterra. Human soldiers checked their weapons and said goodbye to their families. Chancellor Kang Eun-bi spoke to the entire compact the night before the battle. Her face appeared on screens across 100 worlds. "Tomorrow, "The Council will attack our home," she said. "They believe they will destroy us easily. They believe we are weak, divided, afraid. They are wrong." Her voice grew stronger. "We are the children of the exiled. We have survived radiation storms, hostile planets, and 20 years of building something from nothing. We have made friends of enemies and family of strangers. The Council has nothing that can break us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Fight well. Fight together. And when this is over, we will build a galaxy where no one is thrown away again." The Battle of Shinterra began at dawn on the 48th day. The Council fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 500 ships arranged in neat lines, weapons ready, shields raised. They expected to face a desperate enemy, poorly equipped and outnumbered. What they found was something else entirely. The Terran compact fleet was waiting for them. 300 ships, smaller than the Council vessels but faster and more maneuverable. They were spread out in a web pattern, each ship supporting the others, each position carefully chosen. Jinsu watched the enemy formation on his display. "They are confident," he observed. "They think this will be easy. Should we show them otherwise?" "Admiral?" Mireille asked. Jinsu allowed himself a small smile. "Begin the attack." The battle lasted 3 days. The Council history books would later call it the greatest defeat in 10,000 years. On the first day, the compact ships refused to fight in neat lines. They attacked from multiple directions at once, striking weak points, then retreating before the Council ships could respond. Velic scouts identified command vessels and communication ships. Human strike teams disabled them with precise attacks. On the second day, the Council fleet tried to break through to Shinterra. They were met by moral warriors in pressure suits, fighting in the vacuum of space with weapons designed for underwater combat. The moral could survive in environments that would kill any Council soldier in seconds. They tore through enemy boarding parties like water through paper. On the third day, the Council fleet began to fall apart. Ships surrendered rather than be destroyed. Commanders argued with each other over communication channels. The neat formation they had arrived with was gone, replaced by chaos and confusion. Jinsu gave one final order. All ships target the Vothran flagship. The flagship was the largest vessel in the Council fleet, the symbol of their power and authority. It took 200 compact ships firing together to bring down its shields. It took one final shot from the Remembrance to destroy its engine core. The Vothran High Speaker sent a message of surrender from his escape pod. Jinsu accepted it without celebration. "You came to destroy us," he told the High Speaker through the communication channel. "You failed. But we will not do to you what you planned to do to us. Your survivors will be treated with dignity. Your wounded will be healed. When this is over, you will go home and tell your council what happened here." The High Speaker was silent for a long moment. "Why? Why show mercy to those who showed you none?" Jinsu thought about General Hana, who had brought them to this place. He thought about his sister Nari, whose voice had kept hope alive. He thought about the millions who had died in the first terrible years. "Because we are better than you," he said simply. "We always were. That is why you feared us." The battle was over. Of the 500 Council ships, 300 had been destroyed or captured. The rest fled back to the core of the galaxy, carrying stories of a power that should not exist. The Terran Compact had won. But Jinsu knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something much larger. He looked out at the stars, at the wreckage of the battle, at the ships of his fleet returning home. Somewhere out there, the Council was still planning, still scheming, still afraid. Good, he thought. Let them be afraid. Let them understand what they created when they threw us into the darkness. They had tried to kill humanity. Instead, they had made it strong. 60 years had passed since the banishment. The Galactic Council no longer existed. It had not fallen to war or conquest. The Terran Compact had never invaded Council space. They had never needed to. The Council had destroyed itself. After the Battle of Shinterra, everything changed. The species that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years suddenly looked weak. Other races saw that the Council could be defeated. They saw that there was another way to live. The Vothran Empire, once the most powerful member of the council, collapsed into civil war. Different factions fought for control. Some wanted to continue the fight against the compact. Others wanted peace. Others just wanted power for themselves. Within a decade, the empire that had condemned humanity was in ruins. The other council species fell one by one. Economic systems that depended on control and fear stopped working when there was nothing to control and nothing to fear. Leaders who had spent centuries taking from others found they had forgotten how to build anything for themselves. They came to the Terran Compact asking for help, trade agreements, technology exchanges, protection from pirates and raiders who now roamed the lawless regions of space. One by one, they joined the same alliance they had once tried to destroy. Empress Bake Yuna stood in the Great Hall of New Terra, the capital city of the Terran Empire. She was 32 years old, the granddaughter of Admiral Bake Jinsu and great-granddaughter of the broadcaster Nari. She had her grandmother's voice and her grandfather's eyes. The eyes of someone who saw everything and forgot nothing. The Great Hall was magnificent. It had been carved from white stone, with pillars reaching up to a ceiling painted with stars. Sunlight streamed through windows of colored glass. Representatives from 40 species filled the room, sitting in chairs arranged in a great circle, with the Empress at the center. Among them were the Vothran, the same species that had announced humanity's banishment 60 years ago. Their current ambassador, a young female named Vothris, sat quietly, her 4 hands folded in her lap. Her people had once ruled the galaxy. Now they were guests in a human hall. "Thank you all for coming," Yuna said. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying easily to every corner of the room. "Today, we formally welcome the Vothran people into the Terran Empire. This is not a conquest. This is not a surrender. This is a new beginning." She paused, looking at the faces around her. Some were human. Many were not. All of them were watching her, waiting to hear what she would say. "My ancestors were told that humanity had no place among the stars. They were called dangerous, aggressive, unworthy of the galaxy's gifts. They were sent to die in the darkness of the outer rim." She walked slowly around the circle, meeting the eyes of each representative. But they did not die. They learned. They grew. They built, not alone, but together with other species who had been thrown away, forgotten, left to rot on dead worlds. Together, they created something new. Yuna stopped in front of Ambassador Vothris. The Vothran looked up at her, and there was something in her eyes that might have been fear or shame, or both. "Your grandfather was on the council that exiled my people," Yuna said quietly. "He voted for our destruction." Vothris lowered her head. "Yes, Empress. I cannot change what was done. I can only offer our service and our loyalty." Yuna reached out and gently lifted the ambassador's chin. "I do not want your service. I do not want your loyalty born from fear. I want you to understand something." She looked at the whole room again. The old council ruled through fear and exclusion. They decided who was worthy and who was not. They threw away anyone who did not fit their vision of how things should be. She returned to the center of the circle. "The Terran Empire will be different. We will not throw anyone away. Every species, every world, every person has value. Every voice deserves to be heard. This is not weakness. This is the source of our strength." The room was silent. Outside, through the great windows, the city of New Terra stretched to the horizon. Towers of glass and stone rose toward the sky. Ships flew between them like silver birds. 10 million people of 100 different species lived there, working together, building together, dreaming together. "We remember where we came from," Yuna continued. "We remember what was done to us, and we will never allow such cruelty to happen again. Not to humans, not to anyone. This is my promise. This is the law of the Empire." Ambassador Vothris stood. Her voice was shaking slightly. "Empress, my people do not deserve your kindness. We were cruel. We were arrogant. We thought ourselves better than everyone else." "Yes," Yuna agreed. "You were. But people can change. Species can change. The galaxy can change. That is what the last 60 years have taught us." She smiled, just slightly. "Welcome to the Empire, Ambassador. Welcome home." One by one, The other representatives stood and applauded. The sound echoed through the great hall, rolling like thunder. Later that day, Yuna traveled to Shinterra. It was no longer the harsh volcanic world that the first refugees had landed on. 60 years of work had transformed it. The toxic atmosphere had been cleaned, the radiation had been reduced, forests grew on the slopes of dormant volcanoes. Cities rose above ground now, their lights glittering in the night, but one place remained unchanged. The Valley of Stones, where the first refugees had buried their dead, where General Li Hana rested beside the 200,000 who had died in the first terrible year, where Ambassador Kang Taeho lay next to his wife, where Nari and Jinsu had been buried together, side by side. Yuna walked alone among the graves. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She stopped at a simple monument in the center of the valley. It had been there since the beginning, erected in the first year of the settlement. The inscription was worn by weather but still readable. From exile, we rose. From ashes, we built. From nothing, we became everything. She touched the cold stone and closed her eyes. She thought about her grandmother Nari, whose voice had given people hope. She thought about her grandfather Jinsu, who had fought so that others would not have to. She thought about all the people whose names she had never known, who had suffered and struggled and died so that she could stand here today. We did it, she whispered. Everything you dreamed of, everything you fought for, it came true. We are not victims anymore. We are not exiles. We are the Empire, and we will never forget. The stars came out, one by one, filling the sky above Shinterra. 300 worlds looked up at those same stars tonight. 40 species called the Terran Empire home. Billions of beings, human and alien, worked and played and dreamed together. Humanity had been banished to oblivion. Instead, they had built a mighty empire among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.